The NSA's biggest enemy isn't China. The cold corridors of Fort Meade carried an ancient stillness, as if every step echoed the secrets of more than 7 decades of silent wars. For generations, the public believed America's greatest digital rival was China, a distant titan of firewalls and cyber battalions marching in unseen networks. But deep inside the National Security Agency, another truth lingered, a truth whispered only in rooms without windows and halls without names. Historians often describe intelligence agencies as guardians of the Republic, yet guardians sometimes fear what grows in their own shadows. Since the early years of the Cold War, the NSA built a vast empire of listening posts that surrounded the globe like a silent crown. But even then, old reports hinted at an unease rising inside the agency, a quiet dread that the most dangerous breach would not cross an ocean at all. It would walk through the front door with a badge and travel freely through the heart of America's most secret machinery. Still, the myth of the foreign adversary remained powerful, for it was easier to picture an enemy in another land than to confront one within. By the late years of the 20th century, the NSA had grown into a giant whose ears reached everywhere but whose eyes saw little of itself. Analysts sifted through trillions of signals, mapping whispers from hostile capitals and decoding storms of encrypted data. But hidden inside those oceans of information was something the algorithms could not see. A threat that did not speak in foreign dialects or travel along foreign servers. It spoke in American English, and it lived inside the same walls that generations of codebreakers once called sacred. The archives of the agency tell stories that never reached the public. Stories of internal breaches hushed before dawn and fearful directors pacing long corridors. Documents declassified decades later revealed an unsettling pattern. A pattern showing the NSA's greatest anxiety was not China, Russia, or any distant nation. It was the vulnerability of its own creation, a system so vast that a single insider could wound it more deeply than any foreign power. Even in the earliest memos from the 1950s, senior officials warned that internal access posed a threat without a face. That phrase would echo for generations, woven through countless briefings and scribbled into margins of classified reports. And as technology grew faster, the shadow of that faceless threat grew darker, stretching across every floor of Fort Meade. Tonight, the lights hummed softly above endless rows of secured rooms, as if the building itself remembered every betrayal carved into its past. And in that heavy silence, a single truth waited to be uncovered. The NSA's greatest enemy was never far away. It had always been standing just behind the agency's own reflection, a ghost born not from rival nations, but from the mirror of its own making. The chapter closes not with an answer, but with a question that has haunted decades of intelligence officers. The revelation did not arrive with alarms or sirens, but with the soft click of a trusted badge sliding through a secure door at dawn. For years, the NSA believed its walls were impenetrable, built by layers of clearance, loyalty, and an oath sworn to protect the Republic. Yet history would prove that no foreign adversary, not China nor any distant superpower, could inflict the wounds carved by a single insider with quiet footsteps. The year that shattered the agency's illusions was 2013, a year whispered with unease in every intelligence corridor since. Edward Snowden was not the first traitor, but he became the symbol of an old fear finally given a face and a name. He walked through the same halls as thousands of analysts, yet he carried within him a storm that would shake the global order. When he vanished from his post in Hawaii, many believed it was merely another transfer lost in bureaucratic shadows. But within days, classified programs spanning more than a decade were spilling into the world's headlines. The NSA watched helplessly as secrets once buried under iron layers of classification rose to the surface like ghosts long denied a voice. Veterans of the agency knew this was not an anomaly, but a chapter in a pattern stretching back to earlier decades. Long before Snowden, there had been Harold Martin, a contractor who hoarded classified tools for years without detection. Before him, there was Reality Winner, leaking documents that exposed the fragile reality of internal trust. And further back still, during the tense twilight of the Cold War, classified archives describe unnamed analysts who disappeared with tapes and codebooks. The pattern was undeniable. The NSA's greatest vulnerability had always carried a badge, held a clearance, and understood the architecture of the machine from within. Foreign adversaries required distance, but insiders needed only opportunity. Directors of the agency wrote private memos warning of this danger. Memos marked eyes only and locked in safes deep within the oldest wing of Fort Meade. They warned of a threat that did not attack like a foreign army, but seeped quietly through trust, routine, and familiarity. A threat that drank coffee in the same break rooms and nodded politely in the same morning meetings. By the end of that fateful year, the NSA was forced to confront a truth older than its own founding. The enemy it feared most did not speak Mandarin, did not sit behind the Great Firewall, and did not command foreign cyber battalions. The enemy spoke perfect American English, understood every protocol, and blended seamlessly into the rhythm of daily operations. In the soft glow of nighttime security lights, one lesson echoed through every sterile hallway. A fortress built to guard against the world had been cracked open from the inside. And if a single person could unravel decades of secrets, what else might be waiting behind another trusted badge, hidden in plain sight? The chapter ends not with closure, but with a haunting realization that still lingers in the archives. The NSA was not at war with China. It was at war with its own reflection. The storm unleashed by the insiders did not remain within the walls of Fort Meade, for the tremors soon reached Washington, where marble pillars concealed battles far older than any digital age. Long before the revelations of the 21st century, Congress had always watched the NSA with equal parts dependence and suspicion. This tension dated back to the 1970s, when the Church Committee uncovered a labyrinth of secret programs that even seasoned senators struggled to comprehend. In those hearings, the NSA appeared like a ghost dragged reluctantly into daylight, its officials answering questions with caution sharpened by decades of silence. But history has a habit of returning in new shapes, and each new breach, each leak, each whispered scandal, rekindled the old rivalry between secrecy and oversight. After the storm of 2013, the Capitol filled with private debates and public outrage, as lawmakers sought to understand how an agency built on silence could be pierced so effortlessly by one of its own. Closed-door sessions stretched late into the night, the air thick with frustration as senators demanded answers about surveillance programs, internal controls, and the fragility of trust. Some argued the NSA had grown too large, a giant whose shadow extended beyond constitutional boundaries and beyond the grasp of the very government meant to control it. Others insisted the leaks had crippled national security, exposing methods crafted over decades and undermining alliances built during the darkest years of the Cold War. Yet in the clandestine corners of those hearings, a quieter truth began to emerge. The greatest threat to the NSA was not a foreign rival at all, but the relentless pressure of its own political ecosystem. For every foreign adversary the agency monitored, there were committees, subcommittees, inspectors, and auditors probing deep into its hidden architecture. Directors feared not only spies, but subpoenas, not only hacked servers, but televised hearings that could erode decades of carefully maintained secrecy. Behind the scenes, analysts whispered that the political battlefield was often more unpredictable than any digital frontline. A senator's question could cut deeper than an enemy cyber attack, for a single phrase uttered in Congress could reshape legal authorities crafted slowly over generations. During one particularly tense session, a veteran official described the agency's dilemma in a single haunting line. "We guard the nation from the world, but we defend ourselves from our own government." The remark never made it into the public transcript, but echoes of it traveled through intelligence circles for years. And, in the months that followed, the NSA found itself pulled between duty and survival, forced to justify its very existence to those who relied on it most. Reforms were drafted, laws amended, and oversight tightened like a noose woven slowly through legal language. But even as Congress reshaped the boundaries of the agency, a deeper though more unsettling realization took root within the intelligence community. The NSA was not collapsing under the weight of foreign opposition, nor falling to the might of China's cyber armies, despite popular headlines that painted such a picture. It was being eroded by internal pressure, by political storms that shifted with every election cycle, and by a public growing increasingly wary of invisible power. In the dim corridors of Fort Meade, this reality hung heavy like a low, unbroken fog. For what could be more dangerous than an adversary who did not hack, infiltrate, or attack, but instead questioned, restricted, and redefined the agency's very purpose? As the chapter closes, one truth becomes unmistakably clear. The NSA's greatest war was not fought on foreign networks, but in the echoing chambers of its own democracy, where allies could become critics and oversight could become confrontation without warning. In the wake of political storms and internal fractures, a quieter but deeper threat began to rise within the NSA's guarded walls. It did not speak, nor betray loyalty, nor carry a badge or an ideology. It was a creation of human ambition, a force born from circuits, code, and insatiable data. After the tragic attacks of September 11, the agency underwent a transformation unlike anything in its earlier decades. Programs once small and experimental expanded at breathtaking speed, and systems designed for narrow missions grew into sprawling digital empires. Directors demanded faster analysis, larger storage, and algorithms capable of seeing what human eyes could no longer track. By the early years of the new millennium, the NSA had built data centers vast enough to swallow millions of intercepted signals every minute. What began as surveillance evolved into something colder, a machine of prediction, a network that attempted to map intention itself long before action ever occurred. At first, it seemed like progress, a necessary evolution in a world where enemies move through silent networks rather than across visible borders. But deep inside the agency, some analysts began to whisper that the creation was growing too quickly, slipping beyond the understanding of those meant to control it. Old technicians recalled an earlier era when machines obeyed commands with mechanical predictability. Now the algorithms behaved like living shadows, drawing connections no human had authorized and producing insights that no one could fully explain. Reports circulated of systems identifying threat patterns that analysts struggled to interpret, as if the technology were speaking a language born of its own complexity. In private briefings, senior officials admitted that parts of the infrastructure had become so intricate that shutting down a single branch could cripple entire operations. The NSA, a place built on absolute order, found itself wrestling with chaos created by its own hands. Foreign adversaries remained present, but the growing fear inside Fort Meade was that the machines themselves might introduce vulnerabilities more dangerous than any outsider. For every line of code added to secure the system, another line created cracks, tiny fractures where errors or manipulations could hide unseen. Some compared the situation to the nuclear era, when nations built weapons so catastrophic that controlling them became a greater challenge than constructing them. Except now, the weapon was information, fluid, shifting, and impossible to contain. The more data the NSA collected, the more its system strained under the weight, expanding like a growing labyrinth without a master architect. Even the agency's most seasoned engineers confessed that no single person could fully understand the entire structure anymore. In late-night meetings lit only by the glow of monitors, a chilling question persisted. Had the NSA built a network it could no longer fully control? The fear was not of China's hackers, nor Russia's cyber units, but of a digital organism that evolved faster than the humans assigned to tame it. And in the darkest hours before dawn, as servers hummed like distant storms, a truth took shape in the minds of those who dared to confront it. The greatest threat to the NSA might not be a traitor with a badge, nor a rival nation across the ocean. It might be the machines that carried out its mission, machines that reflected human ambition, but not human limits. As Chapter 4 closes, the shadows deepen around the glowing screens, and a final, lingering question emerges. What happens when the Guardians of Secrets create a force that guards nothing and answers to no one, not even them? In the aftermath of political battles and technological awakening, a deeper truth began to settle over the NSA like a long and heavy dusk. For decades, the agency had searched outward for danger, scanning foreign networks and distant regimes for signs of intrusion, betrayal, or hidden attacks. Yet every crisis, every scandal, every internal tremor pointed not outward but inward, toward a force the agency could neither label nor easily confront. This enemy carried no passport, raised no foreign flag, and pledged allegiance to no hostile nation. It emerged from the fragile architecture of human trust, from the weight of secrecy, and from the vast machinery of surveillance that the agency built faster than it learned to command. Veterans of Fort Meade remembered earlier eras when the NSA's mission seemed simple, focused on decoding foreign signals and safeguarding the Republic from distant adversaries. But as the 21st century unfolded, the lines blurred, and the enemy shifted from the outside world to the hidden fractures within the agency itself. Every insider leak, every political confrontation, every technological failure pulled another thread from the tightly woven fabric of the NSA's identity. There were whispers among analysts that the agency had become a hall of mirrors, each reflection showing a different threat, yet none pointing clearly to a single source. Some believed the greatest danger was the human heart, capable of loyalty today and disillusionment tomorrow. Others feared the machinery, systems expanding beyond comprehension, capable of errors or decisions that no human supervisor could fully predict. Still others blamed the political tides, which rose and fell unpredictably, shaping the NSA's powers with every election cycle. But in the archives, beneath layers of classified memoranda and forgotten directives, a different idea began to emerge, that the NSA's greatest enemy was the fear it carried within its own walls. Fear of losing control, fear of internal collapse, fear of discovering that its own reflection was more dangerous than any foreign threat. This fear shaped decisions, tightened protocols, and cast long shadows over rooms built for clarity. And, in those shadows, the agency saw the silhouette of an adversary that no satellite could capture and no algorithm could track. An adversary made not of foreign code but of uncertainty, a force woven into every secret the NSA guarded. As night settled over Fort Meade, servers hummed like distant galaxies, and analysts worked under pale screens while the unseen enemy lingered silently among them. The final lesson was clear: the NSA's greatest threat was not China, nor Russia, nor any rival nation lurking beyond the ocean. It was itself, its own complexities, its own secrets, its own inability to see the danger that grew quietly within its foundations. And now, as this chapter and this story reaches its final moment, one haunting truth remains suspended in the air. A fortress can fall from the outside, but it crumbles fastest when the cracks begin from within. In the end, the NSA never feared the world as much as it feared its own silence. And perhaps the real question is not who the enemy is, but how long the agency can keep that enemy from looking back at them through the mirror they built themselves. Because somewhere, behind locked doors and glowing screens, the reflection is still watching. And it is getting closer.